Hey, I'm Matt Kreiner. I'm the Senior Research Scholar at the Center on Terrorism, Extremism, and Counterterrorism. I do a lot of work on domestic violent extremism, all things digital extremism, and sometimes really weird political stuff that just happens to also be extremism, but we just don't like to call it that because it's hard to acknowledge it.
Yes, it's very true. And one of the things that I want to say here before we start is that some of the issues we'll be talking about today and that you deal with every single day are very, very, very serious issues. But
Yes,
one of the ways that we cope with that is it can be a dark sense of humor that has pokes
very
a little
true.
bit of fun at the work that we do and the fields that we study, but it's essential to sort of cope with. Otherwise, it would just be a path to madness.
That's so true, and it's honestly one of the most important ways that our team over at CTech has dealt with things. We've developed a strange, weird sense of humor about the fact that a lot of times it feels like the world's burning down, and why we're all suddenly desiring to jump off Twitter and never touch it again.
That what a great way to focus on exactly the things we want to talk about today. There's been a change of ownership at Twitter, and we've been watching this process back and forth for months. It seemed for a while that Elon Musk didn't. He wanted to get out of it. Maybe he was really stoned when he made the choice to buy Twitter, but he's there now. He is now in charge. He has started his turnover of the people who are running the company. What were your initial thoughts yesterday when the deal finally closed and he walked into the building?
Here we go. It starts like the Lion King, monkey holding the Simba up. Like I don't know. It's all these sort of thoughts of some big kicking off of a larger trend or a larger issue. Um, that was my emotional reaction. But my professional reaction was, wow, this doesn't look good. Musk is not exactly known for being the most ethical guy. I think we know that he's had some pretty clear connections to individuals that have pretty uh, questionable political beliefs in terms of their promotion of anti-Semitism. If you talk about Kanye West's recent activities, and he's also been an icon of these ecosystems and networks and groups that really exist heavily online that are pro-fascist, are overtly sort of post-fascist, if you will. They look at things beyond fascism, taking fascism and these hate based activities online to the next level. And we saw that within the first hours of his announcement and his weird tweet holding the sink coming into the HQ, that a sustained campaign of individuals started absolutely slamming the platform with overt hate speech, uses of the N word, uses of other racial slurs, stereotypes, etc. All these things flooded the platform, and they're doing it intentionally because they're knowing, that this is now a challenge for the platform as a whole. And that's the first thing that went through my mind was, great, I guess it's time to start really hitting that Twitter API, figure out what's happening there, and start doing some of the research on it that we do for other spaces.
So before today and before this weekend, this week, what was Twitter's role in the promulgation of disinformation and radicalization on the internet?
I mean, like most other major platforms, it's a space where a lot of individuals come and utilize the audience they can build there to push ideas that can maybe radicalize individuals, maybe motivate them to violence, or just generally keep them attracted to what they're saying. And it's often considered the front end of the internet, right? Right up there with Reddit. Like if it's going to happen on the internet, it's going to probably start on Twitter and move to other spaces afterwards. So that means that there's a really good opportunity to build trends and really establish a dynamic within discourse online from Twitter outwards. So when we looked at Twitter in the past, and a lot of studies have been done about Twitter as a space for extremists or radicalizers to occur, everybody uses it, and I do mean everybody. Whether it's political leaders like the supreme leader of Iran using it to push out information that they want the people of the world to know, whether it's down to random anonymous users pushing out conspiracy theories or be presented as bots. It can really shape the discourse and understanding perceptions that society has about any given current event. It can also shape the perception that people have about personas on Twitter that might also be public figures. So we've seen a lot of activity and dynamics occur through Twitter that don't really exist in other platforms. Twitter has this weird ability to be um, persistent and probably will continue to be so, even though people are claiming they're going to leave the platform because of Musk taking over. it has this attractiveness and this draw that a lot of other platforms have tried to recreate, whether it's Truth Social, Gab, or others. That doesn't just people just don't like it. It just doesn't work elsewhere, but it works on Twitter. So that is a natural built-in thing for extremists to leverage. If people just have this natural affinity towards it, you're gonna keep going back to it. You're gonna keep trying to leverage it and exploit it. And some of the ways we've seen that is that, when the Boogaloo movement, for instance, out of 2020, moved off Facebook because Facebook said, "Yeah, enough of you guys. Like, this is bad. Y'all are violent. You're planning things we don't like." They went to Twitter and they've rebranded. And Twitter has sort of a much lower threshold of what they're willing to deal with, or a much higher threshold of what they're willing to deal with. It's a much more permissible environment than, say, Facebook, even, and YouTube and others. Um, the reality, though, is that they're very good at going after very particular types of extremism, and that's listed terrorist organizations like ISIS and Al Qaeda. They built these large scale automated mechanisms to do that. But the rest of it, these softer spaces, if you will, like the fascists and the sort of extreme violence that rhetoric that's come out of the MAGA space, for instance, and the more pernicious ones like the accelerationists, the neo-fascist ones like the Atomwaffen division, the base. They had their heyday on Twitter, and eventually they left because they were booted. But Twitter is not known for its ability to moderate very well, and I think that's one of the big challenges we look at now with Musk. He's clearly and openly stating moderation is going to be changed in a way that's much more open and free. So if we think about all the things I just said with extremists, it's like, well, more open, less moderation. Sounds like something they might want to do.
Um, you mentioned some of the deplatforming that had happened over the past couple of years, and it seems to have been a little effective at quieting some of the noise. Are
Yeah,
you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how
yeah.
concerned are you going forward from here with Twitter?
Oh, 10. Yeah, it's definitely high. I mean, the very real concern that we've sort of seen evidence for borne out in the research is that individuals like former President Trump's Twitter account drove people to violence, like objectively drove them to violence. This is something they cited themselves when law enforcement put forth in court cases. So the reality of Musk coming back and saying that permanent bans are likely gone means that people like President Trump, who've shown that they're not a good faith actor on the platform, they're going to come back. And what does that mean for the overall health of the platform if that is the baseline of permissibility of activity? What now is no longer acceptable, or is everything acceptable? And if everything's acceptable, then you've handed essentially a space for people to come in and say and do whatever they want. And it's not just because they're not just saying this stuff, they're just posting pictures. They're utilizing it to organize, to promote their views, and then launch after people, right? Like, there are online harms that can occur when you're suddenly the recipient of thousands of responses if you're a Jewish individual on the platform, and you have people flooding in with anti-Semitic conspiracy theories or just calling you slurs. Same thing can happen to Black individuals on the platform, women on the platform, other ethnic minorities. All of these people now operate at a higher vulnerability on that space because the overall moderation goes down, and that's the biggest concern that I have looking at it right now.
We saw, I think it's in the news today, someone broke into the house of Speaker Pelosi and violently assaulted their spouse looking for
Yeah,
them, which seems like it could have been fueled by some of these conversations that you're talking about.
almost assuredly. I mean, we've done quite a bit of work with the J6, January 6th insurrection, supporting the committee on the Hill looking at this, the special committee. Alex Newhouse, the deputy director of CTAC, has done direct work with them on the data, on the threat side of it from what we've seen. I've done stuff in my previous capacities with the government on that front. And I can tell you that these types of narratives, these types of individual actions are much more common than most people realize. Those kind of justifications of going into, say, Speaker Pelosi's house happens at a lot higher levels than most people realize. Now, we're not talking like every single person in Congress is constantly being assaulted on the streets or narrow misses, but more than one, more than two is a lot for these types of things. These are people and individuals who have the entirety of the U.S. Capitol Police constantly evaluating threats against their person. So for that kind of thing to make it through is a real concern, particularly when they're citing and talking in a way that sounds just like we had the justifications from the Stop the Steal movement leading into the assault on the Capitol itself. And that sort of shows that pernicious legacy of it, the ability for it to sit around almost 2 years after it actually occurs, right? and still drive an individual to want to take a hammer into their house and violently assault them. That's not good. And more dialogue like that on Twitter, it won't make things better. How much it'll make it worse, it's not obvious right off the top, but it definitely won't make it less, right, overall.
What about people are saying, we're just out there voicing opinions. You can't take our strong opinions. You say that you want free speech, but here we are speaking freely and you're trying to shut us down.
I mean, it's a sticky thing. The First Amendment is something that we cherish, and we've placed it first for a reason. The Institute, all this, it's there at the top for that purpose. But there's a baseline civility that we have to have in the common spaces, right? I mean, you wouldn't just run around screaming racial slurs at someone and think no one's going to do something about it. By the way, that's verbal assault, and a law enforcement officer can actively detain you to prevent you from, doing something additional or keeping on that behavior pathway. So the idea that that somehow doesn't apply to the online spaces is rather absurd. The notion that, oh, my First Amendment means that I can say and do whatever I want. Nope, that's not really how it works. The law has been very clear in the courts that there are limitations on it. I mean, you can go and spend money to be free speech now, but that doesn't mean you can go and say whatever you want, threaten somebody. That's actually a violation of the law. So there's obviously has to be limitations, and for people to take these extreme stances and just say, well, the First Amendment, that's really just them throwing out a heuristic. They're not actually making a reasoned argument. They're just saying, I don't want to be criticized. I don't want to be controlled. I'll do whatever the heck I want. And that's not really how our society operates. And, even other countries that have freedom of speech principles and laws themselves don't, obviously don't have it to the extent that we do with the First Amendment, but they don't permit violence. They don't permit threats. And they don't prevent harassment campaigns as a baseline, right, exemption from the way they engage. And that's the real issue here.
You spend a lot of time online looking at online conversations. When does trolling turn into something more dangerous?
That's a really good question, and I don't know we have a clear cut answer for that, frankly. One of the hardest things to understand about when a threat is a threat versus when it is something else. So whether it's irony or what they call like shit posting, or if it's cloaked terminology, this takes a lot of effort to really parse that out and really tease out the nuances. What we've come to determine in the work that we do on a regular basis is that most of the time you can look for co-occurring or other present indicators that can give you a better idea if it's actually a threat, right? Or if this content is just a sarcastic comment. It's very hard at scale to do these things. But when you're manually reviewing, you can look at the totality of a presence and say, perhaps the profile picture of a swastika gives away the idea that that comment over there is a little bit more charged than an ironic statement. Or perhaps it's the inclusion of an allusion to a conspiracy theory about Jewish people that makes the bulk of the comment now a clear-cut threat, right? And trolling, overall as a behavior, the idea of it is to make people uncomfortable. So it's going to make it harder to determine the difference between pushing the envelope or that edgelord behavior and making a threat. But again, there's always those little indicators. There's people seek out specific communities in order to troll, but they might be doing it in a way that's a little bit more targeted. So if they're going to Elon Musk's tweet and they're responding to that, it's pretty clear cut that maybe they're just making a sort of in the know, in the in group comment. But if they're going to the profile of a prominent Black congressperson, then perhaps we're no longer talking about trolling. Maybe we're now talking about harassment, right? And this is where we start to make those distinctions, those behavioral dynamics. And again, the allusions to certain things. So if you make certain comments, and I'll be careful not to accidentally
Yeah.
say something.
Yes, thank you.
But you make certain comments that might refer to big conspiracies behind the government. Then maybe what you're actually doing is when you do it on Bernie Sanders' account, maybe what you're doing it now is saying that there's a Jewish conspiracy to control the U.S. government, that kind of thing. But it's hard. It's hard, and we work daily to try to make better empirically driven insights so that when we work with our tech partners and we work with the government and we work with the other grants that we have received, we can inform them better and then do so in a way that's keeping ahead of those trends or right at the front of those trends. And Man, the internet's a changing thing every day. I think we all know that. There's always a new term, new trend, but that's why we do what we do, and we're trying to make sure that we're one of those that's right at the forefront, catching that wave as it crests before it collapses.
And that's one of the reasons why the White House brought CTEC in to be part of this new Meta project. And you're working with the
Yeah,
Facebook's and Instagram's parent company and WhatsApp parents company Meta to help them make their platforms a bit safer. And I don't know
yeah.
if you can talk about the work that you've done with Meta yet, but are they sincere about this, or do they just want to put a badge on their corporate website saying, "Look what we're doing"?
Everybody wants a good PR, right? I mean, there's always that. Like, you can't just disassociate these things. But I think there's some benefits to talking about it from multiple different facets. First, the desire to do better is always there. I think that the core mission of why the Dangerous Orgs and Individuals team, which is the prominent fixed point at which we'll be operating with Meta, wants to tackle this and is a part of this as a whole. It's not to score political points, right? I mean, Facebook's, I don't think they can get much worse than they are at this point, frankly, in the public realm. The individuals that work there really truly believe in what they're doing, and they really truly are trying to make the world a safer, better place through the vector, which is their platform. That is, there's always institutional grind, right? Everyone deals with this everywhere. Someone has a different priority set elsewhere. There's always limitations on the effectiveness of what you can do, but they understand, and they came to us to make it a little better. Every marginal cut that we can make makes it a little less dangerous, right? Uh, and yeah, Facebook as a whole and Meta as a whole has taken a lot of hits, but the DOI team, the Dangerous Orders Individuals team, have done some really good stuff. And that's why we chose to work with them because A, they're the biggest platform of its type out there, and B, they really do know what they're doing. And some of the brightest minds in our field quietly sit over in that team and they're saying, hey, we still don't fully get all the things we're working on, right? And we'd love to have you guys come in and help us because you sit at the forefront of these trends and you sit at the top of that wave. So we're going to try to do our best and really try to make that marginal difference here and there and every little time we do something. Overall, the engagement is going, I think, to make pretty clear cut benefits to society as a whole, right? Anytime there's public accountability at this level, when you have an opportunity to engage, I think it's really powerful. It's powerful and important for us to do that because what we can do is sit in there and provide that subject matter expertise. But then we can say, hey, we're an institution that's doing this on a regular basis, so you don't have to just rely on Meta. You can come to us, right? We build these additional capacity spaces for others to come and say, hey, by the way, I saw what you did there. I saw what you were trying to accomplish. We have the same problem. How can you help us? And every time we do that, that little marginal bit of Facebook goes up maybe a little bit more on the other places, right? Maybe it's the ability to move the metric on one policy to a different shop. And I'll be just to back up a little bit on what we're going to do with them specifically. It isn't going to the platform and changing the platform itself, right? We're not going to go in and be like, oh, we found an extremist on Facebook. We're going to help them build capacity elsewhere that's intersecting with the platform. So we're going to go out and get practitioners and we're going to get community resiliency folks that are trying to build their community better and say, hey, Meta set us up to help you guys. Let me hear from you. And here's what we know. It's that knowledge transfer. So every time we float that boat a little higher, there's a little bit more resiliency and maybe we can ultimately get to the point where things like Buffalo don't occur or aren't occurring as frequently. And that's really the ultimate goal.
Thank you for taking some time to chat about this stuff today. Obviously, it's on the front of everyone's minds. I have one last little question for you, which is
Sure.
what can we do if I'm just a normal Twitter user? What can I do if I'm concerned? I want to stay on the platform. I've got a lot of value in there that I see. Should I just start blocking people listening? How can I make the platform a safer place for me?
That's a great question. One of the most intriguing things that I've ever been told from a trust and safety team is that user generated reports actually are still the baseline of what's happening in terms of their actioning content violations or harassment or individual profiles doing bad things. So if you're in a space, don't assume that the platform's going to handle it, right? Report it. It takes a couple seconds. Maybe the exact box isn't able to be ticked about just the weirdness you're seeing that's a little bit extra racist or a different type of discriminatory. It still benefits the overall ecosystem if people are actively taking this leading from the space that they stand and actually like saying, hey, that was weird, I don't like it, I'm pretty sure that was harassment, pretty sure that was discrimination, oh, that's clear cut racism, and just reporting it. That's a baseline easy thing to do. The other thing is don't engage as much, I know we will all love social media, but the bottom line is it's based on eyes on platform, right? So if you really want to make a difference, then it's maybe just pulling back every now and again, knowing the limitations of what it provides you, and protecting yourself too, because ultimately it's more important that we engage these platforms cognitively with the awareness that they can harm us as well as facilitate harm towards others. And that's something we've developed for CTEC too, is that we obviously look at the internet a lot. We also put really strict parameters around how much we look at the internet and what parts we look at and what we do in our free time. So that's those are two easy things people can do. Limit how much you're engaging with it. Report when you see and you do engage, and then push where you can in spaces that encourage others to take accountability for what they do on and off the platform. Every time better content's put onto the platform, then you're going to create a better platform overall. Every time you have a chance to talk to your representative, push a little more, be like, hey, did you notice that they changed all their policies at Twitter? President Trump's back and he's making directly anti-Semitic statements on Truth Social. Maybe he'll say it over here. Those little things, those conversations you drive with your local representatives, your senators, actually do make a difference. Like overall, it really will turn up the dial a little bit more. Outside of that, I don't know. It's they're their own beast, and oftentimes, they're a black box, and it's hard to really pick it apart. But some people sometimes know folks that work at those platforms, and if they have a contact that wants to talk to someone that deals with this stuff on a daily basis, they're always welcome to put them over on our end of the campus. We'll talk to them. But yeah, I think those are the high level takeaways I would give folks.
Matt, thank you so much. I'm going to end the stream on Twitch and we'll say goodbye here on Discord. Thank you.